Hey everyone, welcome to the Fuel the Fight podcast. This is going to be the really special podcast because this is an international podcast from all the way across the pond. Ali Booker is so kind to join us today. She's a registered dietitian practicing with the UK Ministry of Defense. She works with the Defense Nutrition Advisory Service, which is a combined service department providing evidence-based nutrition support to UK service personnel. She has experience as a police officer. She has experience as an athlete. So a lot of different hats. I can't wait to dive into this discussion. Ali, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, no, pleasure to meet you as well. We were talking a little bit before we got started. Your military service. So you're in the reserves. What made you want to go into the military and serve as a dietitian?
So when I first set out on my career, I joined the police service, although the military always interested me. So it was always going to be one or the other. Absolutely love serving as a police officer, but really passionate about nutrition, about fitness. And I just found my career trajectory going sort of in a different direction. Started to pursue my career change, retraining as a registered dietitian. And during that time, it just seemed the perfect opportunity to really experience the military through the reserves, something that I felt I missed out on a little bit because I pursued the policing pathway sort of early on in my adulthood, fell in love with it straight away, wanted to contribute. But as a dietitian, I'd made this commitment, left the police service, retrained, joined the Army Reserves. So I would love to apply what I'm doing now, but in this context, supporting personnel across the services. But in the UK, that role doesn't exist per se as a uniformed role. So there's some fantastic nutrition professionals working in a civilian capacity. And so that was the route I started to pursue whilst I was studying, but I love the green stuff as well, and I love serving. It's that desire to serve has always been there, whether that's serving in the blue team or in the military. So I've kept the reserves going. I find that it adds a lot of lived experience and credibility to my practice as a dietitian, and vice versa. They really dovetail nicely, and I feel that actually, in retrospect, that balance is perfect. So while I might have been a little bit disappointed initially that I couldn't serve, a bit like yourself, as a dietitian, a military dietitian, it's a little bit different over here. But actually, on reflection, I have the best of both, and it allows me to work across the different services as well as still working within the police service as well. So I feel very fortunate.
Yeah, so just so I'm understand is were you a police officer first and then became a dietitian, or a dietitian and then a police officer?
Yeah, great question. I originally trained as a fitness instructor, personal trainer, when I first left school, and whilst I was waiting to join the police service. I was a police officer first, and then whilst I was serving, I started doing some modules in nutrition and human nutrition, and that's where I really felt that was the direction I wanted to go into. At that time, the role in terms of health and wellbeing in the police wasn't there either, and it was at that point I decided, if I'm going to do it, I'm a bit of an all or nothing kind of person. Let's do it properly. Took that career break, decided actually this was for me, and pursued a dietetic career. So police first, registered dietitian next, and then it's all sort of transitioned and molded together, and I've gone full circle, and I'm sort of back working in the police but also the military as a dietitian.
Wow, that's awesome. But your reserve role, you were saying you guys don't have active duty dietitians. So what are you? Is when you put on your uniform, what role is that? Or
In the reserves, when I put on that uniform, I'm a completely different role, completely different cap badge, and our main effort is whatever the effort is of that corps.
mm-hmm.
However, what it does do is it's afforded me plenty of opportunities to actually bring the health and wellbeing piece into our unit. Enabled me to deliver nutrition briefs to colleagues, to fellow reservists and other units, and also regular counterparts as well, when they've wanted that sort of specialist input. It's absolutely opened doors as a uniform reservist to be able to do so. So it's more the reserves has provided the opportunity and the doors to pursue the civilian career, and they sort of sit alongside, and separate to the reserves, but also kind of linked is the work with British Army Sport. Because of my work within the reserves and sort of building up that rapport with colleagues and building up that profile, when the British Army Sport role came along, and I'll be doing some work with the Force Atlantic team, which is the transatlantic row team in 2024, it meant that those opportunities were available as a reservist as opposed to a civilian, even though I perform them sort of as a dual role, if that makes sense. It's very complicated, but I would say the reserves provide that window of opportunity 100%.
No, well, and then I imagine you kind of like with me wearing the uniform, you have that immediately, that credibility with the soldiers you serve with, because you went through that training, you understand it, and from that dietitian lens. Now
Yeah,
working with these
100%.
athletes, is this like so in the Army here we have like the world class athlete program, so these athletes go and compete in the Olympics. Is that kind of what this is, or
Absolutely. That.
okay?
Yeah. So there's different tiers. So this particular work as a performance nutritionist, they're athletes that are elite athlete program. Those that are predicted to compete at Olympic level, to podium on a world stage, and the support goes across the board in terms of that multidisciplinary approach. So on our team, there's a team of practitioners. We've got a physio, we've got a psychologist, we've got a strength and conditioning specialist, myself with nutrition, and we work with those athletes, whether that's group education or whether that's one-to-one, to support them to become autonomous in their nutrition choices, because as you'll be well aware, the confines of the military context sometimes for some of our athletes absolutely impacts on their provision, on the food availability, and how to get the most from their diet. So a real interesting role that's allowed me to apply kind of some personal interest and professional interest in the performance nutrition side, but in the context of the defence setting is quite unique compared to athletes in civilian circles. So again, that's where the reservist experience absolutely helps, as well as my day job as a civilian, working with personnel day to day and getting to grips and understanding the environment is really key, because somebody could have on paper the absolute optimal diet for their sport and for them, but actually if it doesn't work with the environment, then it's just not going to work. And it's about giving our athletes the tools to apply no matter where they are in the world or what's happening sort of when they're balancing their kind of athlete role with their military role as well.
Kind of curious working with the athletes over there and military and police. How big is dietary supplements? Is that an issue you deal with, or is that not so much?
It's a really interesting topic that is evolving over here. So traditionally, the UK Armed Forces policy on supplements is quite strict, zero tolerance towards any drug use. And if anyone was to fail a compulsory drugs test, then obviously that would have enormous ramifications on their career progression. And of course, some supplements, particularly, as you know, our ergonomic aids, potentially that risk of contamination, and then coming up with a positive drugs test is a real risk factor. So traditionally it's been quite strict, and we recommend that athletes use products that have the Informed Sport logo attached to them. It's not 100% guarantee, but it just means that batch has been through a more rigorous quality assurance to mitigate the risk of contamination. That being said, supplement in terms of sport supplements is absolutely being reviewed at the moment, because we know that having that Informed Sport logo absolutely increases the cost of that product. And there might be a perfectly valid product that doesn't have that logo, which someone would be safe to take. So a little bit up in the air a little bit. So an interesting topic, I would say, and I think there'll be more to report on, I guess, in the future. When it comes to food supplements, there's been a lot of research made by colleagues, particularly around vitamin D and musculoskeletal injury risk. One of our greatest risk to defence is picking up an MSKI. So some RCTs in terms of looking at kind of high dosage supplementation during that initial phase 1 training, where our initial recruits are coming through and have perhaps the highest injury risk. Many of our recruits at that age where they're developing, going through puberty, or at different stages, the training's particularly arduous, and we don't always know their nutritional status when they join the military, because such a varied background. So looking at actually, can vitamin D support our soldiers and potentially preserve health, prevent injury. And then if somebody does get injured, because sometimes it's the nature of the beast, actually how do we sort of increase rates of recovery using the different tools in the toolbox, and nutrition being one of those, and actually working collaboratively with exercise rehab instructors, our physios, and all of these professionals coming together and having a bit more of a joined up approach to recovery and rehab. So an interesting area, very much in development, both from the sports supplement side and the food supplement side. And what's exciting for me to see is that service personnel over here are becoming more and more interested in nutrition. I'm getting contacted more and more frequently, with these sorts of questions. So are my colleagues as well, which is fantastic. And it just gives us an idea of that appetite for how do we optimize nutrition to get the best out of our people. And in truth, we need to get those basics right first before we kind of go up that pyramid and then really hone in on the finer details. Things like supplements, meal timing, very much like the kind of the cherry on top of the cake. Actually, how do we get those basics right, and how do we get that education piece right? And that's a real exciting piece of work going forward at the moment over here.
No, that so it doesn't sound, because I know that's kind of an issue sometimes we deal with, is like supplement use is pretty common, and so making sure guiding them, and we have some great programs like Operation Supplement Safety and things, kind of picking the correct supplement, but it doesn't sound like it's you currently have as big issue with that. When you talk about like the physios and the people working with the soldiers, we have holistic health and fitness where we have green suiters that are embedded. On your side, do you have anything like that, or is it all civilians working, supporting your kind of active duty warfighters?
I would say it's a mix, Nick. So
Okay.
things like our physios and our medical teams are absolutely embedded. So the British Army, for instance, they're what's termed our professionally qualified officers. So they go through to commissioned officers, are uniformed and are embedded within defence primary healthcare within unit. So that that model works really, really well, and personnel get support from the point they join. And if something happens, we've got a kind of a medical type hospital, dedicated hospital called Stamford Hall, where they can get that disciplinary support. And there is a civilian embedded dietitian there as well, who works more clinically. From the nutrition and dietetic side, we tend to be civilian, because that role doesn't quite exist, that pathway doesn't exist. We'll work across the services, which can add a real richness, but it can mean that perhaps there's not as many boots on the ground as there is over in the US, and something we'd absolutely love to see, but that we'll see when that happens.
No, understood. But one of the cool things I think with you correct me if I'm wrong, the British military that I learned was you have your own like fitness, like active duty fitness unit that goes out and trains and assesses physical fitness. Am I getting that right, or am I describing that correctly?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So within all the services, there's a dedicated physical training instructor core. or equivalent name. And that's a big core dedicated to upskilling soldiers to deliver the best physical training. And there's absolutely been a push towards more evidence-based, strength and conditioning-based training. And then the other side to that is the physical employment standards work that's been happening across the Army, is currently happening in the Navy, and is currently happening actually in the MOD police as well, which is looking at the maximal demands of the role, and that can be real broad across the services, as we know, but taking those most arduous and then determining a minimum physical employment standard, and making that role related, and that's quite key. So whereas historically the fitness assessments tend to have been the multi-stage fitness tests, press-ups, sit-ups, or running focused, so as fast as you can, best effort, mile and a half. Actually now there's a move towards actually what's role related, generally marching with load in a certain time, being able to physically grip, push, pull. So the Army, for instance, now has its strength conditioning review, and then the role related fitness test. As I said, the Navy's also moved in that direction. And then our physical training instructors from the respective corps across the services then support personnel to achieve that standard and beyond. As you know, it's not just about passing a test, it's about being fit for your role and fit for service throughout the service and mitigating the risk of MSKI. So, a real fantastic arm of the military, which is really supporting our personnel to meet those needs, to ensure that they're operational, deployable, but also that duty of care piece, that longevity, health, well-being, it all really comes together quite nicely.
No, I love that, and we don't have anything like that currently. Maybe in the future, I think we're trying to get after that with some of our holistic health and fitness. Where we're embedding teams at the brigade level at least. One of the things we talk about musculoskeletal injuries, and issue I think for all militaries, right? Do you have issues with is there issues with obesity or getting physically ready recruits when they show up for basic? Is that kind of an issue you're dealing with at all, or?
So within defence, a large part of my work is that health and wellbeing piece, and upskilling colleagues to become defence health and wellbeing advisors. Military will always reflect society. So although I wouldn't classify it as an issue at all, so we're not seeing that, because ultimately those that want to join the military tend to be fitter. We know that a healthier body weight is correlated with better health outcomes and better performance outcomes, but also body size doesn't always equate to fitness and performance also. So actually taking people forwards and developing those and focusing on fitness really is our key, and that's also relevant for my policing colleagues as well, in terms of meeting their job related fitness test. Actually, it's about really focusing on things like diet quality, diet for performance, physical fitness around shift working routines. So I would say our focus is more on, or my focus as a professional, absolutely. So just speaking on behalf of myself, is the focus is on food quality, training quality, and putting that together around work and non-work routines. Absolutely, we know that as overweight and obesity increases, the risk of MSKI and non-communicable conditions also increases. So promoting a healthier body weight is absolutely on our agenda, and we have a UK Armed Forces weight management policy, which is just being updated and reviewed, so that it's always conducive with current times and making sure that it is relevant for our people and is helpful, because it's about supporting our personnel to meet role-related fitness. I don't think there's anything worse than making a judgment on someone's weight and correlating that necessarily to how good they are at their job. It's about supporting them to feel comfortable to do their job, and that as a team, as a collective, deployability, it's going to be a strong team, and they can meet their objectives. So yeah, a real big piece. It's about that whole systems approach over here, as opposed to sort of just really targeting on a weight management type intervention. It's actually looking at the environment, it's looking at those interpersonal relationships, and it's about getting the best from our people. But yeah, that would perhaps be the best approach across all services, and something we've absolutely seen in the MOD police as well.
No, so when you look at that, is there a body composition assessment that you do? So do you like here we do kind of our height weight risk assessment. So if you're over a certain weight for height, we say you're at risk for being over fat. So then we do a measurements to assess body composition. Does the British military do something similar or?
Yep. So on joining during the medical screen, we also look. We call them BCM, so body circumference measures. Sounds pretty much exactly what you've
Okay.
described there. Where absolutely that kind of height to weight ratio, but that's quite an archaic measure, and we accept that there's lots of limitations to BMI. So also looking at waist measurement, and some work that's happening at the moment is actually looking across the different ethnicities, because BMI ranges in terms of health risk absolutely changes culturally and across different backgrounds. So yeah, it's used, it's a tool, but yeah, generally it's using that discretion as people join, and okay, they might not meet the BMI, but okay, the waist circumference provides a really good measure, as well as the passing the fitness standards as they come through.
So they're just held to the weight measurement, and that's for males and females. There's a certain, so if you're over a certain weight for height, you've just got to meet this waist measurement, and then you're good to go.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct. Yeah, and there's different interventions over here. So we've been trialing since 2016 with lots of success across all services, and more recently in the last couple of years in the MOD police, is what we call the Defence Occupational Fitness Programme, known as DoFit for short, because we love to shorten things, don't we? And the DoFit is about providing that evidence-based supportive approach to improving fitness and weight management. So if somebody isn't meeting that BCM level, and at risk of potentially being questioned in terms of entry or what fitness for a role, it's about that supportive, progressive approach to weight management, because the evidence shows us that actually that's the best way to support somebody to become a healthy body weight, as opposed to, it can be really easy to be a negative experience and a negative spiral if someone feels like, oh, okay, I'm overweight and I'm not good at my job. We know that's not true. So it's actually reframing that and giving personnel the support should they wish to receive it on that 12-month long program.
Wow, that's really awesome that you do that, and they have a 12 months, so they have plenty of time to kind of make it a lifestyle change. It's not like they're trying to cut weight or doing some dangerous practice to make that standard.
Yeah, because health is number one, absolutely, and health behavior change takes time. We know, yeah, does a fad diet or crash diet work? Yes, it does in the short term, but has there been that health behavior change, that educational piece, that sustainability? We want to look after our people for as long as possible. So it's about providing them the tools to apply to their own routines and then giving that support. So for instance, in the MOD police, we have workshops, so refresher workshops where people come back at the 6-week point, 12-week point, 6-month point, 9 and 12-month points, so that it sends that message that lifestyle change isn't a quick fix. It's, there's going to be blips, there's going to be bumps in the road, and we're here to support you to achieve your goals. And then, thereafter, they know what worked, and they can implement that lifelong throughout their career.
That's brilliant. That's a great approach. Might have to take note of that and find out. I like that. What's the biggest nutritional challenge you see right now with your military hat when you're looking at that with the troops?
I would say the biggest nutritional challenge is putting it on the agenda, in the sense that um, if we consider that pyramid and we start at the bottom, it's about that nutrition education piece is really important, so that when our soldiers come through, irrespective of what their background might be, some might have great cooking skills, some might have great nutritional knowledge, some don't. So absolutely at kind of the point that recruits join the military, I think getting that right is perhaps our biggest challenge. Also, our biggest challenge at the moment is looking at the provision across the services. So having moved away from military chefs in the UK, there's absolutely still some, and the food quality is reported to be better in those instances, where it's sometimes, in some of the smaller camps, the food provision doesn't meet the quality that we would like for our soldiers. A lot of that is, there's a lot of reasons. Obviously, it can be expensive potentially, so there's that cost element. But if we tie that in with the education piece as well, I have been on camps where the food provision, in my opinion, has been really good, but it's having that knowledge to make the selections, because it can be really easy when you're at the servery and you've got your chips and your pizza and your burgers and they're there, and sometimes there's a place for that. Absolutely, I'm all about that balance. But if that education piece is in there early enough, I try and talk about retraining our mindset when it comes to the servery. So sometimes, right, first, is there a salad bar? Usually it's maybe not so visible. It's at the end. So you've already made your selection, and then you get to the salad bar and you're like, oh, salad bar's there. Well, I've already sort of made my selection. Having a look at the protein source and picking the best protein first, and then sort of filling that plate, if we consider, having that quarter protein. You've got to start your carbohydrate, your vegetables, some healthy fats in there. You've built your plate. So having more visual guides, I think putting them together will go a long way towards improving the nutritional intake of our service personnel. But while perception of food provision, whether that's true or not, is maybe a bit negative sometimes amongst our people, we just need to myth bust that actually there's some great provision already, and it is currently being reviewed, a big review that is starting to be implemented to improve food quality. So some real on the ground physical challenges in terms of what the provision actually is, but also perception, the education piece. And for me, I think that's perhaps the biggest nutritional challenge, and it's going to be a progressive thing to have to crack. It's not going to happen overnight that we resolve that. I'm sure you see it as well over there. It's encompassing at every level, at recruits joining us, at our leaders. Absolutely can be key in terms of supporting health behaviours, to getting the environment right, policy, provision. It all absolutely builds this big picture, which is going to be a challenge, but we will do it.
Yeah, I love it. I was smiling because I think this is across every military. Soldiers will always complain about food. Given it does, you could have you could have steak and lobster on the menu and they'll complain about something, but working through that. So it warms my heart to hear you have to deal with those same issues sometimes. What about the police when you're putting on your police hat? What's kind of the biggest nutrition challenge you see there? Is it similar?
In the police, the biggest challenge I would say is shift work.
Mm.
So shift work, the evidence base is growing in this area, but is still quite limited in terms of, specifically for our emergency service workers, their role, the nutritional advice, and it being conducive with their role. That I think that's an important factor. So again, you could have, research that suggests, this is the perfect way on a night shift to eat or not to eat, as the case may be. But then that's fine if you're not having to respond or be alert and time that all in. And we know that there's the psychological impacts, the physiological impacts, and the biological impacts of working shifts, particularly over a prolonged time, and then how nutrition can mitigate the impacts of shift work, maybe even support those internal circadian rhythms, is still a bit of an unknown, and can be quite an individual thing. So when we've been implementing the Defence Occupational Fitness Programme, but in the policing context, we've really noticed that one of the biggest barriers to maintaining a healthy lifestyle, both physical activity and nutrition, is shift working, and also detached duties, so deploying to other stations or on mutual aid in other forces, where you're away from home and you've not got that same routine and structure, is probably the biggest challenge in a policing population.
Yeah, and messing with those sleep cycles, I imagine too as well,
Yeah,
drives that.
absolutely. Yeah, that permanent stage of jet lag, and I'm really grateful in many ways, having been a shift worker myself. So appreciate, okay, served only for 7 years, but 7 years experiencing shift working. And I remember, as a brand new police officer, and actually asking colleagues, "Oh, how do you eat on shifts?" "Oh, I don't know. I just do this," and "Well, I just do that," and there was no. I was quite surprised that there was no real guidance. There was no real structure for young officers coming through, and that's why I'm really passionate about this particular area of work, and it's in shift working that I'm pursuing my own PhD, and will be researching different interventions with the view of putting together a package, hopefully at the end, where we can provide real support for shift workers, not just in the MOD police, but wider, emergency service workers across the UK, ambulance, fire, and home office police forces, as well as our service personnel across the military who work shifts. So hopefully some real generalizable research that will have some impact, because at the moment there's not a lot in terms of specifically for nutrition and shift workers in kind of tactical roles.
No, I'm excited to read your work when it comes out. That'll be much needed. So yes, agreed. Kind of shifting gears a bit. Now you're an athlete yourself, not just a tactical athlete, but you compete in powerlifting. How did that come about?
So I started powerlifting back in 2012, and it came about actually because I was working as a police officer down in London for the London Olympics, and I appreciate powerlifting is not an Olympic sport, but got to see the weightlifters and was like, wow, I love the gym, love strength, never done anything like that, but really felt like I wanted to compete in a sport. Previously played football before injury, and just thought, actually, I think I'm an all right strength wise. I'd like to give that a go. And I got in touch with a local coach who coached weightlifting, but also powerlifting. But it was the powerlifting that I just gelled with. I just fell in love with just the thought of just absolute raw strength in the squat, bench press, deadlift. I got a buzz for. So I started powerlifting in 2012. I had a little bit of a sabbatical from powerlifting, where I transitioned to the dark side and did a bit of bodybuilding, which I equally loved, particularly with my fascination around nutrition and seeing how the body responds to different nutritional protocols as you prep for a bodybuilding comp. Then I joined the reserves in 2017, and I walked down the corridor of my new reserve unit, and the PTI there, the physical training instructor, looked at me and says, "You do a sport. What do you do?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I did used to do powerlifting. I'll be really keen to get back into it." And it sort of went from there. He linked me in with the Army Powerlifting Union. I got involved in my first competition, did reasonably well, and then that was it. The sort of just been competing for the Army ever since, which is a real privilege, and an honour to do so, and really excited now over some future comps, returning from a little bit of a back injury, and I'm just refocused, and I'm really excited for sort of what the next 18 months is going to bring now.
No, that's awesome, and I'm sure it doesn't hurt your nutrition briefs when when your soldiers or your police officers you're working with, see you putting up those numbers and that weight, in the nutrition that goes with it. They understand that you don't just talk the talk, but you definitely walk the walk. So that's awesome.
What's been really nice is, because of my involvement in Army powerlifting, and obviously as a dietitian, being able to apply my passion for nutrition in the strength performance world, and provide nutrition briefs to fellow athletes, that's been a fantastic opportunity. I think that's where the military is quite unique, in that if you've got an interest in something and other people see that, then there's always space, there's always scope to spread the word and do something, and that's really why I love working in that defence setting so much, because absolutely, like you say, people respect that. Okay, I get involved in a strength sport, so I'm not just talking a good talk. Actually, I apply what I teach, and then I teach what I apply. And I love reading up on latest research in terms of sports performance nutrition, strength performance nutrition, and then being able to relay that to fellow soldiers. Absolutely, it really is a privilege to do so.
With reading up on that, is there any resources or particular nutrition books or websites that you would recommend to folks?
Yes, I've got a couple of great books. So this book, when I was in the library in my first year of study, so the NSCA's Guide to Sport and Exercise Nutrition, you can see I've got loads of tabs in there. Very much is kind of my go-to Bible in the sense of the foundations of nutrition. Also looking at the ISSN's sort of statements and papers that they bring out. They've just brought out a paper, Nutrition for the Tactical Athlete. I'll find that if you've not already seen it and send it across. Sort of those position statements I think are really important because it keeps you relevant. Books I love, but it's that sort of ongoing research, particularly in sports nutrition, which is quite exciting and evolving all the time. So sort of keeping my eye open for those nutrition bulletins coming through are really key. And then I have another book that I like, which is Dr. Mark Bobb's Peak. So the reason I like that is that there is a big nutrition component, but also the foundations of that pyramid are absolutely our wider lifestyle factors. Are we getting enough sleep, alcohol consumption, smoking? It's that whole wider holistic package. And so yes, nutrition's important, but if those wider things are not in place, if your sleep is not there, and that's a challenge across the board, not just for the military and shift working police officers, then in many ways we'll always be on a back foot. So I like the holistic approach of Dr. Mark Bobb's book.
No, thank you. I've got those notes, and I'll drop them in the show notes as well. And much like you, I like books, but I love with the International Society of Sports Nutrition putting out those position papers and then the research and all like that. So you can stay kind of cutting edge on what's coming out. And what's exciting too is there's so many tactical athletes like yourself and across here in the U.S. and then internationally. Whether it's like Dr. Rob Orr down in Australia and all these different places doing this research now, where 10 years ago, police, military, it wasn't as big in terms of having these professionals in there. So very exciting space to be in right now. Ali, where can folks find you if they want to follow you and your work?
If you want to follow me, I am on Instagram. So I'm the Frontline RD, so it's the_Frontline_RD. And I tend to blog many of my professional endeavours. I'm also on Twitter, just as Ali Booker_RD. So more than happy if people want to touch base, reach out and share learning.
No. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for being, so generous with your time this morning. This is a great chat. I really enjoyed it. It might have to do it again. And then if you ever, come across the pond, let us know. Would love to host you here in San Antonio. Don't know. Have you ever been to Texas?
I've never been to Texas, no. I was
Have you?
lucky enough to go to Las Vegas competing in powerlifting back in 2015, and we took sort of a road trip out and went up to San Francisco and LA. It was amazing. So really would love to come back over to the US. Fantastic,
Yeah.
fantastic country.
Yeah, no, definitely. Anytime you're over, definitely give a holler. And again, thanks so much for sharing your knowledge and all the great things that you're doing over there in the UK.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to
All
speak to
right,
you.
take care, Ali. Have a great day.